Okay, let's get right into it. We are about to unpack an absolutely incredible story of survival. We're talking 360 years, 14 generations, and it all kicks off with one man. A man who was legally considered property, who died enslaved, but whose family line, against every single odd, made it all the way to the 21st century. This is just a stunning story of resilience.
Just read that headline for a second. It's from the article this is all based on. And man, does it capture the contradiction at the heart of this story. It just feels impossible, right? How does a family's legacy even begin when the person at its root was denied literally everything, including a future? Well, that's what we're going to find out. In this right here, this really puts the sheer scale of this journey into perspective. On one side, you've got Amindab. He dies enslaved in Virginia, way back in 1665. On the other side, the author of this story, Jaquan, born a free man in Delaware in 1989. That gap, it isn't just a few centuries and a couple hundred miles. It's the journey from being treated as property to becoming a person who gets to tell his own story.
So, where does a story like this even begin? We have to go way, way back to the rough and brutal world of the Virginia colony in the mid-1600s. I mean, this was the edge of the English Empire, a place being built from the ground up on tobacco and, well, on the backs of enslaved and indentured people.
This is our starting point. The man who starts this entire family line, well, he doesn't even have a last name in the records. He was enslaved on a tobacco plantation owned by a man named Sally Littleton. To the system at the time, he wasn't a person, he was property, and property doesn't get a surname. All the records show is Amindab.
But then, something happens. A moment that literally changes the course of history for this family. Amindab has a child with a woman named Mary Vincent. And here's the crucial part. She was a free woman. This one single act sets a future in motion that would have been completely unthinkable for Amindab himself.
So you're probably asking, how is that even possible in a system that's designed to make slavery permanent? Well, it all came down to a bizarre but absolutely critical legal loophole at the time in Virginia. A child's legal status, free or enslaved, followed the status of their mother. Since Mary Vincent was free, her son was born free, even though his father was enslaved. That one detail, that's the key that unlocks this entire 360-year story. Okay, so let's pick up the story there. The father, Amindab, tragically dies within about a year of his son's birth. But his son, who was also named Amindab, he carries not just his father's name, but he carries that precious gift of freedom with him on a journey north.
Just look at this timeline. It lays out this incredible escape, really. Born free in 1664, his father dies just a year later, and then, at only 7 years old, he physically leaves the place where his father was enslaved. His mother, Mary, had remarried, and her new family, the Aukes, took him with them. They literally walked out of Virginia and into a whole new life in Delaware.
And the place they end up, it's not just some random spot on a map. They settle in Indian River Hundred, Delaware, which was the heartland of the Nanticoke people. This was a real melting pot, a community that was forming on the margins of colonial society. It was made up of people who didn't really fit into the rigid boxes of the time. This is where the family would finally plant its roots.
All right, so the family has made it north. The son, Amindab Hansor, is free. But you know, being free is one thing. Building a future for your family, that's something else entirely. This next part of the story is all about how he turned that freedom into something real, something tangible.
And get this is the first time we hear his voice, in a way. This quote is from a court record. At just 24 years old, Amindab Hansor is giving testimony in a colonial court. His name, his age, his words, they're all being written into the permanent record. Think about that for a second. The son of a man who was legally silenced is now speaking as a free man, and his testimony matters.
Now, just 8 years after he appears in that court, Amindab makes another move, an even bigger one. And it all kind of boils down to this one number, 200. What in the world could that mean for a man in his position at that time?
Yeah, 200 acres of land. Just let that sink in. The son of an enslaved man, a free man of color in a colonial world that was stacked against him, purchased his own land. He went from a family history of being property to becoming a proprietor himself. He built a foundation that would keep his family going for generations.
But, buying that land wasn't the end of the story. In a lot of ways, it was just the beginning of a whole new fight. A centuries-long struggle for identity, for survival, in a country that was constantly trying to define them, and sometimes to erase them. And you can see that fight playing out right here, in the official records. Look at the labels that government officials just slapped on the family over the years. Depending on who was filling out the form, they were called mulatto, or having an Indian complexion, sometimes Negro, and even, believe it or not, free white. Their identity was constantly being redefined by outsiders, but through it all, the family just kept on.
And they didn't just survive through all that chaos, they grew. They put down deep roots. Tax records from 1777 grouped them right alongside families that the taxman himself called Nanticoke names. And by 1796, that one single family had blossomed into 14 different households in the area. They held on. And that brings us all the way to today. So let's trace this direct, unbroken line that connects that small community back in colonial Delaware all the way to the author's birth in the late 20th century.
This is it. This is the chain of resilience. Each one of these names is a link that held strong for its generation. From John C. Hanser, born in 1838, all the way down through the Thompsons, the Jacksons, the Davises, until you get to Jane Ellen Davis, who gives birth to the author Buchanan. Just an unbroken line.
And this is where the story just gets, well, poetic. It comes completely full circle. The author was born in a hospital named for the Nanticoke people, the very same community his ancestors walked to and integrated with all the way back in 1671. The history of the land and the history of his family all converged right there, at the moment he was born.
And if you needed any more proof, well, modern science comes in to seal the deal. DNA analysis confirms exactly what all those centuries of paper records pointed to: a rich mix of West African, Northwestern European, and, yep, Amerindian ancestry. The history isn't just in the documents anymore, it's literally written in the blood. So let's go back to that first Amindab, the man who died enslaved without a last name, without any property. What did he really leave behind? He didn't leave a will, or land, or any record of his life, but he left the one thing that mattered most, the most powerful thing of all. He left a child who was born free, who walked north, who bought land, and who started a line of 14 generations that just refused to be erased. What does it really mean to leave a legacy? Maybe it's just that.